Hi there, and appreciate you visiting my channel. The most complex stories of retribution and dishonesty are found here. Slumber following coital contact is a joyful mood. This allowed me to bond my wife to our bespoke ash wood headboard. She came back to awareness slowly. She grieved and opened her eyes slowly at last. Her boyfriend Bob Simmons woke up to find his wrist shackled in reaction to her scream. Bob's scream, as he dropped from the bed, was more machined, slitting his wrist and twisting his arm. He battled to get back on the bed and found he couldn't talk. Your mistress's boyfriend, perhaps standing at the foot of the bed carrying a high-caliber revolver, will probably carry out the plan upon waking. How did you sleep that night? I asked a question. Our wife Jerry cried, "It is not as it seems." I advised, "Let's see its look as you lie in our bed. What is the matter with you and the stranger trying to convince me that you are a good wife?" Bob wheezed, "Don't be silly, your wife's adultery does not send you into prison." His focus turned to the .35 Magnum I was carrying. Given my shaking with grief and anger, that made sense. "The man you left behind me is walking towards here. If you were my wife, I would be compelled to protect your honor, but I am not willing to do so as it seems to have less impact going forward." His still great respect for you caught me as fascinating. Barb ignored what we said. "Jerry, kindly set aside the gun and have a talk about this." She begged the authorities not to confine the person in issue. "In our relationship, the rose has bloomed, right? You two really offend him. I expected you would pay him respect. You split us for him." I replied regretfully, "Jerry, we shall stay one. I did a major mistake, but we can fix it." Wept, "I will fix it. Using what approach will you be able to do this? Will you refrain from having sex with him going forward? Given that is the only future link I have to you. I loved you rather greatly. Should it happen, my life would be wretched. I have no want to go back yet, supposing I have to live with a cheating woman." I sent a request. I carried the revolver at my temple. Pulling the detonator this way could be the easiest method. I would free you and thereby ease your suffering. She cried, "No, Jerry, come on, execute it," he said. I carefully lowered the revolver. I entertained an idea. 6 shots were fired when the piston was activated and the handgun drum opened. Their body met the floor. I descended and grabbed one. The jackass grumbled in annoyance. The headboard he was attaching wasn't broken. Unfulfilled disappointment. He calmed down once I took out the last cartridge. Barb seemed nervous. 135 Magnum round weighing 125 grams. From this handgun, the projectile flies with 1,500 feet per second. Its harm area is virtually tripled and flattened when it strikes with vigor. Whichever way you survive the impact, the trauma will cause your death. I made sure their focus was drawn in. The drum took the cartridge. "Barb, you know I used to like betting before our meeting. It almost tore us apart in our first years of marriage. I stopped for you. I did gain from stopping. Unfortunately," I said, "my love for you was the only reason I could stop." Tilting the handgun back, I rotated the drum. As the handgun was in motion, I turned my wrist and reinserted the cylinder. I am not sure about my alternatives, hence I will let fate decide the result. I call it fate's finger. I pointed the gun toward her partner first slowly. I shall start with Bob, the honor guest. "Bob, should I note for your girls or wife?" I asked a question. "Bob, should you swallow that projectile, the house at 726 Maple Lane will be empty. When your twin children, Zoe and Chloe, and your wife, Allison, get the delivery from my investigator, they will respond with grief." I considered sending less graphic photographs, but your daughters are right to know about your late-night workplace operations. I have put pictures of your other 2 prostitutes to finish the picture. When I pointed the gun at him, I had no idea he could turn more pale. I took off the mallet. He shut his eyes, igniting the weapon. "Click on here, eh?" Hammer struck the empty cartridge container. He seemed to be losing consciousness, which worried me. He woke up with senses. He wet himself, hence the sheet around him turned yellow. "This round you came out on top. You might run across your gorgeous women once more." I answered calmly. I pointed the rifle at my wife. "Barb, concerning you? Have you booked for your own death? I was at service last Sunday. I take assuming you have come clean about your guilt. Should you die today without confessing, will you land in either heaven or hell, unless there is a metamorphosis? In your faith, is adultery still seen as immoral? Called her to ask. She mumbled, eyes closed. Indeed. I'm sorry, what then you said? Begged her. Jerry, adultery is a violation for sure. It's against God as well as your marriage. I never owned my axe. She said that a gunshot would make me irredeemable. Pulling the gun, I said, let us find out whether your God wants your life. Squeezing it triggered the device. A hammer knocked against the empty cartridge container. She cried as I once more pointed the gun to my temple. Barb received instructions. I was rather depressed prior to your entering my life. I felt good only during that winning run. The excitement always took front stage above the financial benefit. I remember how carefully you handled my hands in the emergency department that evening, compassion and grace. I suffered like Gino's goons did. If I were to have a wife as kind as you, I promised myself to stay away from the game. I never told you that your hands were keeping me from moving, therefore securing my consciousness. I have not gambled in any kind after paying Gino that evening. I know without you life is intolerable. My life starts with you. Should the missile strike me, my misery will end. You cannot inflict any more damage to me. I almost want that I said softly. She started to cry as I pulled the trigger. Check. Someone hit the empty cartridge container with a hammer. My friend yelled. I am furious beyond words. Bob was ashamed of himself. I aimed the gun at my dear friend. Given the likelihood that this could be your last moment on Earth, Bob, could you explain your fascination in married women? I can't understand it. Your wife is wonderful, your daughters are really lovely. For what exactly? I asked for it. I beg you, son, not to carry out my murder. By shrugging, Thumb pulled the trigger. He started crying out of nowhere. Finding and negating their triggers is absolutely vital. Your partner seemed unhappy. No matter how good a marriage is, disagreements and flaws are natural in everyone. She lusted after me. All I had to say was stress her attractiveness and helpful attitude. This would be the last one published. Said he was. I win when I fuck another man's wife in her husband's bed. This person looked to be really struggling. Laying on the dirty sheets, he seemed hopeless. Although I should have snapped a picture, I resisted to do so to stop the gathering of damning evidence. He grumbled as he tried once more to break the headboard of the bed. I turned to focus on his eyes. Someone triggered it. One hammer hit the empty cartridge container. Asshole passed out from unconsciousness. I aimed the gun towards my wife. You or I. The fact that my spouse left depresses me. Barb, I value you much as here I nearly thought it was not you. Should I find you two in bed when I get home and subsequently kill myself, things you would be tidy. You would keep on. Murder does not worry me. I told her regretfully that all that suffering would be gone and you could harass anyone without restriction. She tries to relax. Each of us was clutching to one strand. Jerry, kindly stop and desist. Your case has been presented rather well. Sitting in his urine, Bob passed out from anxiety. You came triumphant. Placing the rifle down will help Bob to resist charging. Your actions were not permanent. Living with you seems interesting. Should you hand over the weapon, I will carry out any divorce decision you provide. If I can get you to go, I will daily admit my crimes. She begged Jerry to stop. Barb, I could perhaps be no more Jerry. I got enraged when I found your axe. I discovered you performed it in my bed. I had an internal component die. I seem as the finger of fate. Do you wish us to confirm your time? My forefinger brought back the hammer. The trigger came on. The hammer knocked against the empty cartridge container. Barb yelled when I aimed the gun toward my head, as if fate has decided something. Barb, I greatly value you. I'm sorry for it. I wish your success very best. Declaring, I released the gun slowly. Jerry, please do not damage the headboard, she said, crying. You are free to embarrass me, either I will go or stay. Do not participate in this, she yelled out. God, I need your help. Barb, this is more desirable. I complained. I said I loved you. I closed the eyes, igniting the weapon. Click on here. One hit the empty cartridge container with a hammer. One could be wise to clarify things. Being a participant allows one to see this. I have extraordinary digit dexterity. Gino cut my left hand, my right hand was not hurt. Card tricks, chip shuffle, and coin tosses help to improve dexterity. Extraction of a cartridge from a revolver's drum is therefore simple while the audience is watching the muzzle. Tilting the revolver backwards to turn the cylinder allowed me to extricate the cartridge and lay it in my palm with enough cover. Everything was fair game afterward. For what reason? Though I was not sufficiently ready for these people's suffering, I wanted for them to be nervous and disturbed. Starting our story yet again. The way my wife looked made me guffaw uncontrollably. By whom is this person? Did you think you two could lock me off? I choked and cannot seem to go back to breathing. I laughed as I dropped down to pick all 6 ammo cartridges from the ground. I made sure this time the pistol was loaded appropriately. Taking any risks was pointless. My wife handed me the key to the handcuffs. She was breathless and in tears. Jerk. Bob was starting to come around. Barb kept trying and resisted reaching for the key. Bob was staring at me while he was looking at the key, trying to decide what to do next. I told him to get the key, scumbag, get your clothes, and leave. Bob, kindly consider that as advice. If the cops call, I will execute your family and you in the most torturous way, but you are allowed to live today. To save your children, your spouse, and yourself, keep quiet.